Would you like ideas for using your 8x8 pattern paper to make cards without making scraps? Hi, I'm Jess from jesscrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have 8x8 paper busting template number 8. It is for A2 size cards, although it works well for A6. Most of my sketches that work for A2 cards work pretty well for A6. I know the measurements are slightly different, but especially in this case, making things a little more narrow and taller is totally fine. You might just notice that your square sits a little bit differently on your triangles. And the reason I specifically mention that today is because I'm going to be using the Paper Boutique Ocean Bliss collection, which is made in the UK, and I tried to make sure that I sometimes pick paper collections that are made outside of the US, like in the UK or Australia. So those of you who are watching from the UK, or in other cases, Australia, might have a better chance of getting them. Now, I purchased this on scrapbook.com, so it is very much available to those in the US as well. I'm gonna pick 2 papers today because they are single-sided. So this template will make 4 cards with 1 sheet of 8x8 paper. However, if you want to mix up your patterns, you might want to include 2 sheets if you're using single-sided paper. Now, if you have 8x8 paper that's double-sided, great, go ahead and just use it as is and maybe flip them over. Or if you have single-sided paper, just go ahead and use it and just know that you're gonna have the same pattern throughout each. I like to mix up my patterns a little bit, so that's what I'll be doing. And also, I wanted to let you know this is a free template, so if you follow the link in the video description down below, the very first link will send you to a place where you can sign up for this paper busting template. So let's get started with cutting our paper. So it tells you exactly how you need to cut all of the pieces and what you're going to need for each card. It's kind of color coded, so like the purples go on one card and the blues go on another. I decided to go with the yellow patterned paper. There are in this collection several kind of similar papers, and I just kind of based it on which one I thought added the most color because I knew I wanted to color some images to go along with it. So if I had picked like the blue paper, I would then be adding a lot of extra colors to color my images later. I'm gonna cut 1 sheet of pattern paper for you, but like I said, I am picking 2. I picked the colorful yellow piece, and then I'm gonna pick a more neutral blue dot also from the collection. The directions tell me that I need to cut a 3-inch strip, so 3x8, another 3x8, and then finally I'll have a 2x8 left over. You can cut it in whatever order works well for you. I'm cutting 2 inches off and then 3 inches off, measuring, taking 8 minus 2 and then minus 3 just to make things a little bit faster. And then I have my 2 3x4s. I need 2 more 3x4s, so I'm taking that 3x8 inch piece and I'm cutting it in half. Then you can take these 3x4s and cut them on the diagonal. I show you cutting them on the diagonal from the top left to bottom right, and that's how they will then appear on the card. However, as an important note, this does work on directional pattern paper, so if you notice, my yellow paper is pretty much directional. It's not terribly, it's not. I realize you could turn it any way, and always some of the animals will be sort of facing up and some will be facing down. But if you do have a directional pattern paper, or there's a one there's a direction you most like, this will work. So here on the dots though, it's not as important. And if you choose, you can follow, like I said, from the top left to the bottom right, but if you do it the opposite way, either intentionally or accidentally, that totally works as well. You can do the top left to the bottom right, and then it will just look reverse on your sketch. I want to highlight that because I just want you to know that if you make like what seems at first a mistake, that mistake is actually not a big deal, and you don't have to pay such careful attention to how I have chosen to do it on, like, in terms of like where I put the diagonal cut, because I know the diagonal cuts can be a little tricky, but I'm basically lining up the point on my paper trimmer line and coming down with my guillotine trimmer. You can of course do this with a slide trimmer as well. I will say I think with a slide trimmer, when you're cutting a corner like this, especially on a lighter weight paper, this is from the Paper Boutique. It is not a super lightweight paper, but it's not the heaviest pattern paper I've ever worked with. And when you work with a lighter weight paper, sometimes when you're dragging that slide trimmer down, if the blade is not sharp, it can kind of catch on those corners and cause some imperfections. So I would recommend a sharp blade. So make sure you've changed your blade or sharpened it or something like that if you're getting some imperfect cuts. And then we're going to take this 2x8 inch strip and cut it to 2x2 squares. We'll repeat that entire process for the yellow patterned paper. In the sketch, I do call for a cardstock mat. You will have leftover cardstock scraps. I do talk about in videos what I would do with these, and I'm less concerned about having cardstock scraps personally, just because I find them a lot easier to use and store than I do patterned paper scraps. So I'm gonna need a single 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 inch mat for my 2x2 square. If you would rather not have any scraps at all, or if you want to save time in the process, I think that you can make the card without it. So you'll see there's these 2 triangle pieces. They go in the 2 corners, and then this sits in the middle. I think that looks a little like it just needs a little more weight to me. I want it to sort of stand out a bit. I am going to add my sentiment and my image there, so I do know that will help, but that is why I'm going to choose to do these cardstock mats in the back. So I'm going to need 8 of these because each pattern paper makes 4 cards, and I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper, therefore I need 8 of these, and so I will cut 2 1/4 inch strips. As you can see, I am starting with a scrap of cardstock in the sense that it's not a full sheet. So I always go to my less than full sheets before I start cutting into a new piece of cardstock, unless, because occasionally I know that my mats that I'm going to be cutting are pretty efficient on cardstock, and so sometimes it's actually better to come to the full sheet if I know like there's not a lot left. But generally, you know, rule of thumb is I'm going to start with my scraps first, or my not complete sheets first. And then I'm going to show you my kind of like favorite trick for cardstock scraps. And I know so many of you have seen this before if you follow my videos, but I never know when it's someone's first video. So I always like to share this little tip. So, and especially because I had just the perfect sheet. Actually, I don't remember to always share it, but this scrap just says you absolutely do it to this one. Okay, so this is a 11 inch by like, I don't know, probably 1/2 inch. So what I like to do, especially with these small scraps, is turn them into foam strips. I mean, obviously they're not foam, they're cardstock, but I'll put a little adhesive on them and stick 2 layers together because I often use 110-pound cardstock, so it's pretty thick. This is the Park Lane, which I do find to be a little bit thinner than the Recollections, and then even that is sometimes thinner than the like MFT or Lawn Fawn. But I take that bit of cardstock and I layer it together, and then when I want to pop something up, I don't know if I'll use it today because my images I'm going to show you later, they're really small, so I might not bother, but I could then cut this into smaller bits and put it behind instead of using foam tape. And if this isn't thick enough, you can do it again until you get the thickness that you want, and that's kind of nice too because it's flexible. You don't have to have 3 different rolls depending on how thick you want your foam tape. You're making a lot of cards like this. Like today I'm making 8 cards. To me, you know, sometimes if I'm only making 2, I don't worry so much about the batch processing kind of thing. But I'm going to put my adhesive on the back of all of my little squares, for example, at the same time. And if you have like a tape runner like this, it can be particularly helpful because it's not going to dry. Like the adhesive that I put down on the first square won't be dry by the time I get to the last square. And that's why I personally use a combination of liquid glue and tape runner. I find that if I use my Scotch ATG, my refills can be quite inexpensive, and then I can use my glue for smaller things or when I'm going to immediately stick down the paper, embellishment, etc. that I have put. I think, you know, you gotta kind of, ways you can save time is by finding out like what particular tool is best for the situation that you are in. So once I've glued down the triangles in the corner, I can put one of the squares in the center, and then we're pretty much done assembling the card in terms of the sketch. But now I want to talk about embellishments. There is a new Lawn Fawn set that I'm really excited about as someone who loves Lawn Fawn critters. So if you have a lot of Lawn Fawn critter sets, then I think this is cute because the scale is right. So there are other speech bubble stamp sets and die sets out there, I'm sure. But this particular stamp and die set is cool because you know that the scale is right and the size is right for a lot of your existing Lawn Fawn sets. And I think there's an argument for even buying the dies, even if you don't want the stamp set, buying the coordinating dies, because I'm going to actually use them with just the dies today. So you absolutely could stamp and then die cut. But when you do that, it takes more time for a couple of reasons. Not only do you have to, stamp it, then die cut, and that, that alone takes more time, but you also have to like line it up around each of the images and that kind of thing. And so what I think is nice about just even getting the die set is that you can cut a few of them at one time. So like, I think I want to use, sorry, back up a moment. I'm using the Simply Celebrate More critters. I have used several of the Simply Celebrate critters. I used one like 2 videos ago. I used like the bunny one, and a lot of them, they come with a few sentiments and they come with this big, long speech bubble. I don't always want to use all of them. So I'm pretty sure even on the bunny card, I didn't use all of them. I cut them apart, and that's what I'm gonna do again today. I'm just gonna use 3 critters on some cards and 2 critters on other cards. So I don't want to use them all in a line, and therefore I don't want this large speech bubble. And so I'm so happy they came up with a solution, because this is something I've been wanting, is being able to just use 1 or 2 sentiments, or in this case, the 3. So anyway, that's the stamp set I'll be using. And I used the dies to cut them out, but then trimmed the edges. Then I have the coordinating, but it's not included. You can just add it, it's an add-on, is a Simply Celebrate More Critters add-on, and it has a lot more punny sentiments. So you don't need a stamp set like this, but they're really fun. However, I encourage you, if you're like using, these like the sea creatures here, going into your other sea creature stamp sets, particularly if they're from Lawn Fawn, and I bet you'll find some sentiments that work well. So back to having this die set. Now, if I've picked that I want to use Seize the Day and You're a Star, I can see that those fit in pretty much every single one of these speech bubbles. Not so much the longer ones, but the longer ones are great because there are longer sentiments. So I'm going to choose, and then these teeny tiny ones, I don't think they fit. Like Wow fits in it, but Seize the Day doesn't. So I'm going to pick a couple of just like medium-sized speech bubbles, and I'm gonna be able to run them through the die cut machine all at the same time. And so that's gonna save me a lot of time versus having to pick which ones specifically I want. And this is a great use for those scraps of cardstock we talked about before. So I'll place a few on, run it through the machine until I have 8 little speech bubbles. So then after I die cut all of those sentiments, I stamped either Seize the Day or You're a Star, depending on which set of those little ocean critters I wanted to use. And I've created all 8 of my cards. Remember, you can get the free template right there as the first link in the video description, and you can also purchase a 10-pack. So if you don't want to enter your email repeatedly, or you just really know you're going to want to use up a bunch of 8x8 paper, I might suggest that. If you're catching this live, I am having a sale currently in my Etsy shop, so you can pick it up at a steep discount. And if you like this video, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with the share to your crafty community. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.